What's up, guys? Welcome to Newswave. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about today, so let's just get started. First thing we're talking about today is Rime on the Switch, because remember how before it was $40 and everyone kind of freaked out because it was $10 more than, say, the Xbox One or the PS4 version? Well, developers must have heard us because they then lowered the price down to $30 digitally. I say digitally because Graybox is still keeping the physical version at $40, and they're citing higher production costs, manufacturing and stuff that would force them to sell at a loss if they sold it for $30. And realistically, that makes sense. I understand that. I think it was the digital one that people didn't understand why it was more money. But they are including at least a voucher that you get with the physical version for the soundtrack. So you get a code that you can then enter, and you get the soundtrack that normally retails for $10 anyway. So technically, if you like the soundtrack and everything, you may as well buy it physically if you enjoy the physical media, because it's going to end up costing the same if you get digital and then the soundtrack. So they at least threw something in, along of course with the box and cover art and everything. You get something extra with it, which is cool. That's a good little move on their part to make it, I guess, fair for people who will be fans, I guess, of this game. I myself am a sucker for physical media, so I will probably buy it physically. I don't really know how into the soundtrack I will be until I probably play through the game and kind of listen to the music and everything going on. If it's good, there you go, I have a voucher, I'll get the soundtrack. I'm just happy to see that this is not becoming a thing overall where these companies seem to charge more money for the Switch version. Even if it is just the digital version, at least the option's there. If you don't want to pay the extra $10, you can get it digitally and be done with it. And we already have seen that if it comes out at $60, it will be $60 across the board, much like we saw with Lego City Undercover. So I would not expect any $70 games to show up for the Switch. And in a move that has surprised no one, Vanquish is coming to the PC. Now, if you've been following, obviously, Newswave for the past couple days, you've probably heard me talk about Vanquish a couple times in all the different ways that Sega has been teasing it, whether it's with Bayonetta, for example, or on their Twitter where they're posting pictures. Well, now they officially announced that it will be coming out on the PC this month, May 25th. And with that, Sega put out the Steam page for it, where I believe you can now pre-order it and everything, but they have some features listed that a lot of people on PC they care about, because of course they have the beefy video cards, processors, the whole thing. They want to be able to push this, and it looks like Sega is going to do a lot. They're doing things such as unlocked frame rates, unlocked HD resolutions, which is great, so you should be able to go up to 4K, much like came with Bayonetta, for example, extensive graphics option, stuff like that. Because of course it was on like the PS3, for example, where it had limited resolution. It was definitely not 1080p, it was much lower than that. Well, now we'll be pushing it up to 4K, and because it was an older game, this should run fine on mid to lower end hardware as well, much like Bayonetta does. I mean, Bayonetta was getting pushed around pretty easily by a 7770, which is not a new card at all. It's pretty old. Either way, I kind of like this this little initiative here by Sega to take some of their older games that didn't make it to the PC and slowly port them over. And I guess not really even slowly, right? Bayonetta hits, now Vanquish hits. What's next? Virtua Fighter 5? Actually, yeah, keep an eye on that. Let's say Virtua Fighter 5. Now we get some news from the retro gaming world. Now, if you're at all familiar with like the clone systems for the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, you know that right now the best way you can get HDMI picture is either with obviously an NES Classic, which has no cartridge slot, or a Retron 5. Well, it looks like Hyperkin must have heard everyone, because they're releasing a standalone NES system that will play apparently most of the NES games. They say it has good compatibility, but not complete compatibility, but it will provide HDMI out. And this just kind of popped up on Amazon, like randomly out of nowhere. I'm not really sure why there was no announcement by them, or the press release or anything. And it's called the Hyperkin Retron 1 gaming console, which of course we've had Retrons, which is like just the bare bones NES one that was really cheap and kind of cruddy, to be honest, not a very good system overall. Well, here we go, Retron 1 HD gaming console. They have it in a gray variant, looks very similar to, say, the NES color scheme. Looks like it has one controller and HDMI out, and it does boast good compatibility, but not 100% compatibility at $39.99. And it's available for pre-order right now, actually. You can go pre-order it now for $39.99. It comes out May 25th, so about 2 weeks from now it'll be out, which is odd to just have this pop up on Amazon and then it comes out in 2 weeks. But if you're looking for maybe something a little cheaper than any Nintendo Classic, and you have physical cartridges, this would probably do well to display on, like, say, a flat screen TV. Either way, we'll have to see how well their pin connectors hold up, because if you don't know anything about these Hyperkin Hyperkin third-party systems, the NES pin connectors, not very good on them. And Media Create released their data for May 1st to May 7th of all the different games, obviously, that are being sold in Japan, physical numbers and everything that we're getting here, including systems and games. Looks like Nintendo pretty much ruled that week. And I'm not even kidding. The top 10 that they have there, list 1 through 10 of the best sellers for games, every one of them was Nintendo except for number 10, which was Nier. Yes, that's right. Between the Switch and the 3DS, they pretty much completely owned that week. As you can imagine, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe took the top spot with another 90,000 units sold through. Right behind them was Dragon Ball Heroes. Then underneath of that was Monster Hunter Double Cross. The systems were about the same as well, with the Nintendo Switch clocking in at 47,911 units, which was right behind them was the PS4 at 28,000 units. So it looks like the Switch pretty much still rules Japan right now, as we would expect. This does appear to still be a supply constraint, considering it seems to always be around 47,000 units at all times. Those seem to just be shipments going out. This, of course, puts the Switch right at 825,000 units sold in Japan, which means it's getting very close to that 1 million mark in there. In fact, by next month, we'll be talking about 1 million units sold through in Japan. And then when we get closer to Splatoon 2, it's going to keep selling, which means we may just have a supply constraint in Japan at least for another year minimum. And then, of course, you get Mario and then any other E3 announcements. Forget it if Pokemon and Monster Hunter are there. You're going to have supply constraints for at least the next 2 years if that's the case. Either way, don't expect the Switch or any of their first-party games that get released to go away, because they're going to own Media Creates for quite a while over in Japan, despite any big releases from, say, the PS4 or, God forbid, the Xbox One in Japan, because the Xbox One is non-existent in Japan. It's a big week for them with 677 units sold for the Xbox One, and yeah, 677. That's actually up by a good % from last week's. Also, if you're unsure about Mass Effect Andromeda and how it was doing financially, this seems to pretty much seal the deal that it did not go at all how EA and BioWare wanted this to go, because they are completely scaling down that studio. This was first reported over on Kotaku. What's happening is BioWare is pretty much taking the Mass Effect franchise and just putting it on a hiatus right now, and they're reassigning that studio. And this, again, is Kotaku reporting on sources that are kind of behind the scenes, or at least close to the situation. According to them, they're taking BioWare Montreal and they're making it a supporting studio. So one that will help other studios with things like assets or programming or storyboarding, whatever. Basically, they are now assistants, essentially, and they're going to do their best to help other games get out there. I mean, we did see that one game that they've been trying to get done is getting pushed to next fiscal year, and more than likely they're going to use the studio to help support it and make sure it does not get delayed again. And realistically, Mass Effect is an expensive game to make, so with this last one not doing so well, maybe they're going to put it on hiatus for now, work on this unnamed game, and then make Mass Effect, go back into production maybe a year from now, 2 years from now. Who really knows at this point? I mean, it's a shame what happened to Mass Effect Andromeda, because it was such a poorly done launch, because it seemed like they sold an incomplete game with intentions, obviously, how we've seen, to patch it after release. And, that kind of bothers me when companies release an unfinished game to people, hoping that they can keep us occupied while they patch in what should have been there at launch. So I don't really feel bad about the situation here, because realistically, if you released a good Mass Effect Andromeda, you probably wouldn't be reassigned. They'd probably be getting you on the next one instantly. But we still don't know enough behind the scenes. There is still a chance that even if Mass Effect Andromeda did well, this next big game that they want out there to compete with The Division, for example, and Destiny is top priority, and maybe at that point it's almost all studios on deck to get this thing done. We just need to know a little more about this unnamed game. Maybe E3 will know a little more. Maybe that's another reason they're having the studio move over, because if they start showing it at E3, this thing needs to get out by next year. And that's it for Newswave today, guys. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know what you think about any of the stuff we talked about today, whether you're happy that Rime did get its price reduction and now is at least parity across the board with the other ones, digitally at least. Maybe you don't care about the physical release like maybe I do, but there you go. Digitally, same price. Maybe you were interested in this new Hyperkin console coming out for NES games, $40, HDMI system that plays NES cartridges. Not a terrible price if you ask me, with one controller. Or maybe you are so happy that Vanquish is coming out, you've already pre-ordered and you are ready to unlock that frame rate and hit some 4K visuals. That's it for now, guys. I will see you next time.